right, Scott Bryson, super excited to have you on the show. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's my pleasure.
Yeah, so tell me, let's start with a little bit about your background, what you got you into the Secret Service. Kind of give me a little bit about you growing up and what led you to have the mindset that would lead somebody, because the Secret Service obviously isn't for everybody, nor is any military or paramilitary force that we have in this country. So tell me a little bit about yourself and what led you to do something so amazing, really.
Well, you're kind. I'm from North Carolina, a small town right in the middle of the state, just outside of Charlotte. Grew up in a very whatever normal household is. I think I had a normal upbringing. Two loving parents, and I was the older child. I had a sister about 2.5 years younger than me. And we grew up very, middle of the road, average American family household. Went to church, went to school, played sports. I played basketball, baseball, football until I got to high school. Then I, of course, got cut from the basketball team. They realized that I wasn't that good, and so did I. But I played baseball and football. Was fortunate enough to walk on as a football player at Appalachian State University. I played football for 2 years. Knew I wasn't good enough to get a scholarship, so I wasn't good enough to go to the league. So after 2 years of getting kind of beat up and like, okay, I think my football career is coming to an end. We won the conference, and I took my ring and ran off into the sunset. I saw a lot of guys tear ACLs and get hurt, and I escaped without any major injuries. So I thought, okay, enough is enough. And I just started focusing on my next chapter, which I married my high school sweetheart. So that was amazing win for me. I was an education major. I thought I wanted to be a high school football coach, and I have coached a lot of high school football, and I love it as a volunteer. But I kind of got this bug to become a Secret Service agent, which is really weird for a guy who's got an education degree. But I met a guy who was in the Secret Service from my hometown, which is super weird too, because it's such a small town. And his dad had been the sheriff of the county for many, many years, and he had a bunch of siblings that were in law enforcement, ATF and local sheriff's office and Secret Service, which is super interesting to me at 19. Met him and kind of got the bug to protect the leader of the free world. That just sounded like an amazing adventure. And he had been on the counter assault team, which is the Secret Service version of a SWAT team. And I was really interested in that, which I ended up doing later. And yeah, so I kept my degree. Some good advice from Bob. He said, we're very diverse. We're very small. Like the FBI is pretty big, and they focus on lawyers and accountants and things like that. We're kind of a diverse agency. So I stayed the course, so I didn't lose a bunch of credits. Got my education degree. Did teach school for a short time. I was a December grad, so I taught from January to June at a middle school, which probably ruined me. If I'd have gotten into a high school, I might have loved it. But middle school kids were rough, and so yeah, I'm like, off to law enforcement I go, which is what I wanted to do anyway. Became a cop for 2 years in Concord, North Carolina, which was my hometown, and got some real good experience there and got on with the service. I had applied multiple places, but got on with the service eventually, which is what my heart's desire was. 25 years later, my marriage survived, and my 3 children are adults now and productive members of society. And my marriage, I didn't become a statistic, and my children still talk to me. They don't hate me, so we did something right.
Yeah, exactly. That's awesome. So in my limited research and my limited knowledge about the Secret Service, I understand that there's several different jobs, so to speak, that you can have. Can you kind of explain all of the different things, or at least some of the different things that you were involved in? And then also, you also mentioned there that there's pretty high probability that whether you're FBI, CIA, Secret Service, a lot of these guys get divorced because they're really married to their job. Speak to the logistics of what it was like and really how you kept that fire going with your wife and be involved in your children's lives as well.
Yeah. So Secret Service is a very interesting outfit, actually. I'll give you the Cliff Note version best I can because it's a long story. But the Secret Service is, as you know, known for its protection, the protection of the president, the vice president, and things like that. But actually, the Secret Service was formed in 1865. It was one of the last things that President Lincoln signed into, I guess, I don't know if it was law, but he signed in an executive order or whatever it was called back then. Because 2/3 of the money, there was the Civil War going on and the Confederacy and the Union and all these things. So they didn't have a unified dollar. So each state kind of had its own currency. And so counterfeit money was a big problem. So 2/3 of the money in circulation was counterfeit. So he devised a group, and they were called the Pinkerton Group. And there was like 11 dudes that started out, and they went out, and I'm pretty sure they were judge, juror, and executioner back in those days. But those old boys went out and did criminal work, and so they were combating counterfeit currency. And that's how we started. I say we, they. But, after that, so I guess so Lincoln got shot and killed under the protection of the United States Army. And then Garfield got killed. And then McKinley got shot. And so you had three presidents. By 1901, you had lost three presidents due to assassination. So Congress decided we've got to do something to protect these dudes on a full-time basis. And so the Secret Service took over that responsibility. And so from there on, we're, basically famous for protecting presidents. All the movies are about, there's an old movie that's really cool if your audience is into old movies from the 80s. It's called To Live and Die in LA. That's a really cool Secret Service movie about counterfeit money, but it's like completely old school. Things have changed now. Everything's gone cyber and it's really boring and white collar. But back in the day, there was some cool undercover things that you could do. But the protection outfit is 24/7, 365. So you've got the agent side of the house, which does investigations and protection. Then you've got the uniform side of the house, which is the guys in the uniform, and they protect the Naval Observatory, which is where the VP lives. They protect the White House. There's a K-9 unit. There's a TREC unit. There's a surveillance unit. There's snipers, the counter snipers, which those guys kind of were all over the news last year when Trump got shot in July up in Butler. The counter snipers took the guy out. So it's really interesting because the agent side of the house has two jobs. They've got investigations and protection. The uniform guys do just law enforcement and protection. So I started off in the Charlotte field office. I was lucky to start in my hometown, basically. And it's called Phase 1. When you come in as an agent, you're in Phase 1, and you become a criminal investigator, and you do all the things to investigate crimes. When you go to Phase 2, you go to your protection detail. For me, I wanted to go to the president's detail. I was fortunate enough to get picked up. I went to George W. Bush's detail in 2003, March of 2003. And from there, I went to the counter assault team, and then from there, I did some other things, which I just had a really good career. I can't complain. I'll be happy to get in the weeds on whatever you want to know about my career later. But to answer your question, that's kind of how the Secret Service is divvied up. Pardon me. And as far as the second part of your question with the wife and the kids, we're Christians. We're not perfect individuals by any means, but we are Christians. And I think that whether you're a Christian or not, your family can survive if you have some type of faith basis, right? I don't know what people use for their moral compass if they don't have some type of faith, but I think being intentional is also important. Let's say I have some friends that are. I'm a conservative dude, but some of my friends are liberal, and some are. I've got a few friends that are agnostic, and it's like you have to be intentional. So whatever your belief systems are, you have to be intentional, right? And I think what we tried to do, it was shift work. So 6, 2, and 10, right? And so what we tried to do is we always tried, when I was in town, of course, if I was out of town, all bets were off, but we tried to have at least one meal together. And this was way back in the day before technology was such a problem, right? You didn't have smartphones and all these problems. So people spent more time interacting with each other. So we were very intentional about trying to have a meal together, whether it was breakfast or supper, whatever. And then, as for my family, we went to church together, and I think that played a big role in it.
Yeah. As a man of faith, I think one of the largest lessons that people can take away from the Christian religion as a whole is, as Christians, we're called to be servants to each other and to love our neighbors. I think the Secret Service is probably the highest expression of that, because you are ready at any point to give your life for somebody else. So how did your faith play into your work in the Secret Service, and also when you came home, feel about you being in that dangerous of a situation every day?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Thank you for asking that. As far as my wife goes, she's just a really strong individual. Unfortunately for her, she lost her father when she was 9 years old. He died of a heart attack. So she is just extremely strong from a psychological standpoint. I joke all the time with her, like, I'm a woman and she's a man internally, right? Like, I'm a very type A guy, but I'm also very emotional. If I care about things, I just really pour my heart out. And I think for her, just having that experience as a child, it had some drawbacks too, because she's got this wall built up that sometimes it's hard to break through, but she's just an amazing person and her faith is strong. She held the family together because I was gone a lot. And I think that I had been a cop before. It's all she knew. Like, we got married. I was a cop. So that's all she kind of knew. And so she's just really good at compartmentalization, I believe. So and our faith is strong. So it's like 100% of people die. And I don't mean to sound contrite, but, unless the rapture happens while we're still here, 100% of people die. So, for us who are believers, we just always took solace in the fact that I'm going to wake up in my bed the next morning or I'm going to wake up in heaven. So it's like, and I don't mean to downplay it because it's a serious question, but that's just kind of how simple it is for us. We just keep it simple. And I hope that answers your question in a fair way. I'm not trying to be
that's awesome.
cavalier or whatever. But that's just what she could probably answer that a little bit better, but I think that's probably where she would be on that. And then as far as the other stuff, it's like the Secret Service, with the exception of July 13th, by and large, let me say this. It's a serious job for serious people, and it's not cut out for everybody, and or everybody's not cut out for it. And I think that the standard is the standard. And I know you didn't ask this question. We're not going to go down a DEI rabbit hole, but, the standard should be the standard. And if you can meet the standard, you can be on the team. If you can't, you're not, and that's okay. There's different things for different people. But the service is very thorough in what they do with hiring people. They hire amazing people like Secret Service, FBI, CIA, SEAL Team 6, whatever. You're going to have a 10% of knuckleheads, right? You're just always going to have about 10% of guys that are kind of, jerks or whatever. I don't care where you go. That's just the laws of average, right? So, but by and large, those are pretty good odds. If I could get a 90% return on investment in my investments, that'd be good, right? So like 90% of the workforce is just really squared away people who compartmentalize. Like I said, I'm a conservative Christian. Some of my friends are liberals. Some of my friends are gay. Some of my friends are agnostic, whatever. So they're just really good at hiring quality people who compartmentalize. And regardless of your skin color or your sex or your preference, sexual preference or whatever, religious preference, can you do the job? Can you come in and do the job? And if the answer is yes, then let's get it. Let's get to it. And so I think what I'm trying to answer your question is the thoroughness of the advanced work and the thoroughness of the process of hiring quality people generally, knock on wood, mitigates those circumstances. So are people willing to, would I die for Trump? Would I die for Obama? Yeah, I would. I wouldn't want to. I'm not a sadomasochist or whatever. I don't want to be a martyr, But you hire quality, when these guys join the military and they go overseas and they fight and they they die. They don't want to die, but they're willing to do it. So I think, and I'm always feel a little weird talking about this because I don't want to sound pretentious or holier than thou or whatever. But, the Bible talks about, Jesus talks about, no greater love hath he than a man would lay down his life for his fellow man, which is obviously what he did. I think that's in Matthew somewhere. But, I don't really look at it in terms of like I'm some awesome person or I'm some superhero. That's all I've known. And I think you have it in your DNA. You're born with it or you're not. And if you're not, that's okay. There's different categories of people, right? There's sheep, there's sheepdogs, and there's wolves. I just happen to be born a sheepdog, and so I just embrace that. And, I'm not sure if that's really a great answer. I can expound on some more stuff if you want me to, but I appreciate the compliments and everything. I'm just used to being around like-minded people, and I just don't know any different.
Yeah, no, it's amazing that you said that because I had wrote down here the next thing I was going to ask you is there is a motivational speaker. I don't know if you know of him, but his name is Eric Thomas. And he has a really good quote that sticks with me, and it says, the standard is the standard, just similar to what you just said, and that people tend to show up and they think that their best is the standard. And society as a whole likes to tell us that as long as you give your best, you'll be okay. But what makes us think, I think how arrogant and how ignorant of us to think that everybody else is going to redefine success when we show up because we're giving our best. So you mentioned the standard is the standard, and I'm sure that, like you said, 90% of the people in the Secret Service are highly qualified, highly trained individuals that have the wolf mindset similar to you. What did that teach you being around them every day about leadership, about discipline, and about teamwork especially?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I played college football, like I said, and I'd played a bunch of sports growing up. And so in the police department, you were in a car solo, but you had the brotherhood and the roll call, and I just missed the camaraderie, and that's what I was looking for. And so that's why I was sort of gravitated toward the president's detail, because that's not everybody gets an to do that, number one. And then number two, like the counter assault team was a group full of type A individuals that were highly motivated, physically fit, can shoot good, all those things. And so I wanted to be around like-minded people. And, were we a SEAL team? Were we a special forces group? No, we weren't. Okay. I'm not trying to compare, but it's the same intangibles. I think the people that do those jobs have those intangibles. Not everybody's willing to run toward the sound of gunfire, right? When things happen, unfortunately, you see these things happen in society today. People stand there and watch, or they get out their phones. I'm like, where are the men at? Like, I don't want anything bad to happen, but like, God bless America. I wish something bad would happen when I'm standing on the train or the bus. Like, It's like, where are the dudes, And I've always been around those type of people, and I just don't understand why other people aren't like that. But, when I was on the counter assault team, I remember just feeling like I was middle of the road. I never wanted to be last, and I tried not to be last in anything. I didn't expect to be first. Sometimes I was, but as long as I could finish in the middle of the pack, I was just around some amazing human beings. From a physical standpoint, from ability standpoints, from the intangibles. Like these guys, some of them had been military. Some of them, I worked with a guy who had been, former Delta guy. I worked with a couple guys who had been SEALs, and I got to interact with SEALs, and I got to interact with GRS, which is the, paramilitary group over at the CIA. So I've been exposed to these people and these things, and I hadn't been in the military because I graduated high school in 1990, and there just hadn't been a conflict really, since Vietnam, I guess. And, had 9/11 come along 10 years earlier, I'm fairly certain I would have dropped out of college and joined the Navy or the Army or something to try to make it into the SF community. I don't know if I would have made it, but that's the DNA that I have. That's the intangibles that I have that not everybody has. And like I said, it's okay if you don't have those, but those are just the people I'm used to gravitate. And those are the people I'm used to being around, and those are the type of people I like to gravitate toward.
I've talked a lot, especially with the past few guests, about the feminization of society and how we have less and less godly men that are willing to stand up for other people in public situations, like you said, maybe on a train, it may be standing on the street or anywhere else, but also in the church, we have pastors that are much more concerned about how their skinny jeans look than actually telling the truth and condemning sin and being honest and having strong morals that people that they're leading and tasked with leading by God can follow and be an example for their flock, because they are the shepherds for God's people. So what would your advice be for somebody, specifically a man, that wants to be more prepared, more ready in any situation? And what do you do to kind of train your readiness every day throughout in public life?
Yeah, so I'm a big sports guy. Like I said, I coached a lot of high school ball. Sorry, I'm not sure what's wrong with my voice. But, coaches, let's use Nick Saban. Nick Saban's just an easy one. He's the GOAT, right? So Nick Saban doesn't just show up on Saturday and hope for the best. Hope's not a plan. Now, I will say this. I always say this. Hope in Jesus is a good plan. But hoping for good outcomes, hope's not a plan. So, these coaches it's called game planning. Even the high school guys, they watch tons of film and they game plan and they prep. Well, I call it war gaming. And I don't know if that's the proper term because I haven't been to war. I've been to some war zones, but I personally haven't been to war. But I call it war gaming. Or some people call it if this, then that. So you have to mentally prepare yourself before you ever leave the house. Before you ever leave the house, you have to, okay, I'm going here. And it's not a state of paranoia. I use the color codes of awareness. I'm not sure if you're familiar with those, but I talk about it on my show all the time. The color codes of awareness, you could look them up. I saw a special forces guy talking about this one time as a motivational speaker, and he was talking about the OODA loop and all this stuff and the color codes of awareness, which I had never heard of. But it's condition yellow. Like condition white's at the very lowest, right? You're completely oblivious. People are just walking around stuck in their screens. They're just oblivious, and then there's yellow, which is a low level of alertness, right? So that's where you have to hang out. You want to be in yellow. So you sit with your back to the door when you go to a restaurant. When you go to church or to the movies, you sit on the aisle. My family knows I'm going to get the aisle seat. God forbid somebody come in, I'm going to get up and go fight. That's what's going to happen. But I can't do that if I'm stuck in the middle of the row, right? So sitting with your back to the wall. Never sit with your back to the door. Having that mental acuity, like, okay, if this happens, then this is what's going to be the result. For me, I'm a big Second Amendment guy. Of course, I feel naked without my gun. The only time I don't have my gun on my person is when I'm in my house. And I don't think that's a state of well, that's not really true because I live out in the woods and I'm out on my gator sometimes running my chainsaw. I don't have it with me, but I have something nearby. But, the world that we live in is going crazy. And I don't think enough people take advantage of the Second Amendment, quite frankly. And I live in an open carry state too, which is a whole nother can of worms. But I think there's just getting mentally prepared, because I think people are, well, that couldn't happen to me, and it happened, was it 2 months ago now that poor little girl from Ukraine got stabbed to death on the train in Charlotte. And my daughter used to live right down there in Uptown. And 3 years ago, she was like, well, I don't even ride the light rail. It's too dangerous. And I'm like, what? I mean, it's Charlotte. This isn't Chicago. What are we talking about? It's just people are crazy.
Yeah, a relatively clean city.
Yeah, people are crazy. And it's just, what I think it is I think it's spiritual warfare. I think spiritual warfare is, as a Christian, I think most people believe in that. But I think this evil has manifested itself in society and in humans. And that's what it really is, I think. But yeah, to get back to your point, it's like white is no good. Condition white, you're completely oblivious. Condition yellow is where you want to hang. Then orange, you start to get the spidey senses, right? That doesn't look right. So like when I go into a restaurant, wherever, I've been doing this a long time too, by the way, so I don't expect other people to do this overnight, but you got to read the room. When I go into a restaurant, when I go into a whatever room, the first thing I do is I look to see if there's a threat. Do I perceive anybody in here to be a threat? Nope. Well, that's good. Now, is there any other dude in here? And you don't have to be the biggest dude in the world. You just have to have that look in your eye. Like, you know what I mean? Like some of the SF guys in the SEALs, they're not big dudes, but they mean business, right? They'll go to work real quick. So, does this guy look like he can handle himself either physically or does this guy look like he's a conservative or a type A type of person who's going to carry the gun, right? And is this guy going to get in a gunfight with me if we need to? Or is this guy going to help me, jump on this guy? So I read the room, I look for a threat, I look for any ally that might be in there, and then I assess, and then I watch the door. I never, I'm not paranoid. I get some hate on my Instagram page. People are, saying mean things, which is what the internet does. But I don't think it's paranoia. I think it's being prepared, If you fail to plan, it's planning to fail. And that gets back to the thing of, well, I'm hoping for the best. That's not good.
Yeah. Well, it's much better not to beat the cliches in here, but it's much better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. And I think for me personally, I wasn't necessarily raised, even though I was raised in South Carolina, I wasn't necessarily raised around people who were carrying every day and who hunted a lot or anything like that. But when I met my girlfriend about 2 years ago, we've been dating for about 2 years now, and she has a brother-in-law who is super into hunting and obviously carries everywhere he goes. He's kind of your stereotypical Southern man. And I thank God every day for him because he's taught me so much about what it means to be a man, what it means to protect my girlfriend and then protect the other people around me that I don't know. I think, and not to say anything about my own father because he was amazing in every way, but you can't cover all bases. Everybody has a weakness. And I think that was one of the areas that really I lacked in my childhood that I wish I would have had more development on. So what can you say about fathers, especially Christian conservative fathers, and what they need to be teaching their sons and raising them to be dangerous and raising them to be protective of women and the other people around them?
Yeah, I think Jordan Peterson says it pretty well, maybe the best. And I'm going to paraphrase here because I can't remember exactly how he said it, but you need to be a monster. You need to be capable of being a monster. You want to control that, right? You don't want to let your anger control you. You got to control it just like your mind. We control our mind. We don't let it control us because, trust me, I'm talking to myself right now. The mind is a powerful place, and that's the battlefield. Right up here is the battlefield. That's where the enemy attacks us. So you have to be able to harness that rage or that anger. Like some of the strongest, toughest, most badass dudes on the planet are your Navy SEALs, your SF guys, your fill in the blank, your HRT guys over at the Bureau, the paramilitary guys at the agency, but they walk humbly and they carry a big stick. They're not the loud, gregarious guys. It's the guy in the corner that's really quiet that you should be worried about, right? And so I think what men need to do, especially men of faith, is you have to lead by example. I say all the time, I manage my finances, but I lead people. I want to be a leader of men. And it starts at home, right? And so how do I do that? Well, I hopefully show that through an example, right? So a good leader always leads from the front, and he or she never ask you to do something that they either A, haven't already done or wouldn't be willing to do, right? So as a 53-year-old man, I can't go out there on the football field and do, 15 cross fields with my guys. I, pass out. But when I was 17, I could, but I have done it, right? Mm-hmm. Or I'm asking them to do a bunch of up downs or burpees or whatever, going to the gym at 5 a.m. when I was in college. Like, I've done the hard things, right? And so I know what it takes. And so I'm not asking you to do something I haven't done. And every single thing that you do, like at the football practice, leads up to the game. We don't just do certain drills because they're cool looking. No, they add up to fit into the scheme. Same thing in life. We're not just going to do random things. We're going to do things that make sense. It's a building block, and you have to have that good foundation. If you don't have a solid foundation, it's just a matter of time, And so I have two grown sons and have a daughter, and of course, you raise boys and girls differently. You just do. But I think you have to make them do some things. It's okay to do hard things. We started lifting. I didn't start working out really until I was in middle school. My dad didn't work out really. My dad's an amazing human being, but he wasn't much of a workout guy or whatever. And we did some fishing, but we didn't hunt or anything. So I learned all that stuff on my own. So sort of like you, I wish I would have had somebody teach me that stuff. So I kind of had to learn it on my own. So I've sort of tried to pass that to my sons, and working out, taking care of your body, getting enough sleep, eating healthy, all the things. Like I don't smoke. I've never done any drugs in my whole life. I have a very addictive personality. So I just knew that if I tried drugs, I would probably like them. And I just stayed away from it.
Yeah.
I have done my fair share of drinking back in the day, which I'm not proud of, but one of my sons is a complete teetotaler. My other son just, drinks socially a little bit, just like I do, just here and there, but pretty much given that up. I haven't had a drop of alcohol in over 3 weeks, not necessarily from a spiritual perspective, but more from a health perspective. I think it's poison. So I've just basically given it up. I don't like to say, well, I don't drink because if I want to take a drink, I'm going to take a drink, but I don't have to have it. I'm good without it, So I think it's just like leading by example is the key.
Yeah. About a month and a half ago, I had a baseball coach on. He owns facilities really around the country now, but he's based out of the Midwest, and all of the best baseball players in the country come to him. And I was lucky enough to have him on. He made a video. He has a bunch of followers on Instagram, and he makes great content. Alex Hale, everybody should go check him out and go listen to that podcast as well. Go watch that video. It's really good. But he made a video last week that just rocked my world. And what he said in it was essentially that it's not noble to be kind or a good man or soft and gentle with people if you're not capable of danger and if you're not capable of violence. It only becomes something that is noble and makes you a good man if you're capable of violence and you use discretion and you choose not to use that on innocent people, and you are able to use that on people that do evil and harm to you and your family. So what would you say that the Christian religion as a whole needs to develop in, especially the men in the church? Because I feel like we have a lot of people and a lot of men that shy away from the Jesus that flipped tables in the temple and tend to emphasize more the Jesus that shows mercy and kindness, but they don't tend to emphasize the justice. So what do you think in the church we need to do differently to raise men to be more on the side of being capable of violence and choosing not to exercise it?
Yeah, that's very important. He basically was saying, I don't know if he got it from Jordan Peterson or not, but that's basically what I was trying to say a while ago. Like, Jordan Peterson said something very similar to that. I don't know if you've ever caught him saying that, but I would look that up too. He articulated it so well, and it sounds like your recent podcast guy did too. But yeah, you have to. It's what you're capable of, not what you necessarily do. And one of the things that my wife says to me all the time, and she's kind of talking about money more like a joke, but she's like, just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? So that's kind of just a little bit lighthearted way of talking about what we're talking about. But, I think what you have to do, for me, what I've done is I take the word of God, I've got my Bible over here in the book, but I take the word of God and I don't deviate from it. You don't get to pick and choose the parts you like. Well, I believe this, but I don't believe that. So I'm like, well, no, you got to talk about it all. So what I do is I have been fortunate that I find pastors that preach the gospel unapologetically, and they preach from the word of God, and they don't sugarcoat things. I don't want to TED talk. I don't want to, I don't want every sermon to be heavy. I don't want to hear hellfire and brimstone every Sunday, but hell's a real place, and you're either going to go to hell or you're going to go to heaven. And how do you get there? Well, Jesus, that's it. He says in John 14:6, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. And if you don't believe that, then that sucks for you. And I hate that. And I hope you'll come around. But I need a man that's going to preach that and not shy away from it, because person's soul is at stake. And I don't care about your attendance. These guys want their attendance rosters to grow. They want to get, I don't know how each church works, but like maybe they get bonuses, or I don't think a lot of them are necessarily too worried about money, but I think they're worried about being offensive, and they're kind of riding the fence a little bit.
Certainly
it's like lukewarm.
perception.
One of the most scary verses in the Bible is when Jesus talks about, believers being lukewarm. And he's like, you'd be better off to not believe at all than to be lukewarm. I'll spit you out of my mouth. And like somewhere else in Matthew, he talks about, I think it's Matthew 7:21, I believe it is. He talks about, these people are like, well, didn't we prophesy in your name? Didn't we cast out demons? And he's like, get away from me. I never knew you. That right there, I'm pretty sure it's Matthew 7:21. That scares me big time. I don't want to be cast out. And James, I read in this morning, James, I think it's James chapter 3, talks about, I didn't realize James was such a good book until I started. It's short. I read the whole thing again this morning. It's awesome. But James is a great book. And Jesus talks about your faith being wishy-washy. You can ask things for God, but if you don't believe they're going to come true, if you're not going to receive it and believe it, then why should you expect it to come true? Like you're like a wave being tossed about. You can't be wishy-washy. And that's what I have struggled with in the past because of our sin. We're saved by grace, right? And so I believe that you're entitled to grace, and she's entitled to grace, and you're entitled to grace. But like my sins are so bad, and how could I possibly be forgiven? So it's that battlefield that I talked about with the enemy, letting go and letting God take over, and just so believing, surrendering, and then accepting the grace. Like I tell people on Christmas morning, if somebody hands you a present, you don't go, no, I'm good. No, you take that bad boy and you open it up. So like salvation is a free gift from God. Why would you turn that down? But to really answer your question, sorry for the diatribe, but it's basically, we need to be bold. It's in Acts chapter 4, I think it is. Gosh, who was it? I'm trying to remember which two disciples it was. They had basically been brought in before the Sanhedrin, and they were like, hey, stop preaching about this Jesus guy. And they're like, we're not going to stop preaching in his name, because we saw a dead Christ, we saw we saw a resurrected Christ. We can't not talk about it. We saw it. And so these brothers were out there preaching in Jesus' name and healing in Jesus' name, and they were told to stop, and they wouldn't stop. And so what they prayed for, they didn't pray for protection or happiness. I think a lot of people think that we're supposed to be happy. Trust me, I want to be happy too, but nowhere in the Bible does it talk about your happiness. God said, I'll never leave you or forsake you. He didn't say it would be easy, right? So it's like they pray. Those, I think it was Peter and John, I don't know, but Acts chapter 4, you guys can fact check me. But basically, they prayed for boldness and courage. And that's what these pastors have to do. And there's several guys online that they're pretty good. You got to be really careful what you put into the old noggin, because, just because somebody's yapping on YouTube doesn't mean they're squared away. But like, I love listening to Greg Laurie. I think Franklin Graham's good. Josh Howerton's a young guy that I've been listening to a lot lately. I used to listen to Vody Balcom, and there's different guys, John Piper and all these different people. But you just have to find men that are going to preach the gospel from the Word of God unapologetically, without shame or fear of retribution. That's what it is.
I absolutely love everything you just said. And I want to thank you for someone. It takes a lot of courage in today's society for someone with the following and the platform that you have to be unapologetic about those views. And I think we need to spread so much more of that. And we need so many more people like you. So first of all, I just want to thank you, because what you're doing is amazing. You're a great follow on Instagram, and we'll put, what is your Instagram handle so that people can go follow you as well?
It's so odd, man. Like if I joke all the time, like if I was in a band, I'd be the drummer. I'd be in the back. I don't need to be the lead singer. I don't like being up front, but it's Scott Bryson, Bryson, Scott Bryson, BTS. The BTS just stands for Beyond the Service. So you could YouTube Beyond the Service, or you could just do Scott Bryson, BTS. We're really big on Instagram. We had a TikTok thing going for a little while, which I didn't really want to do, but it was a means to an end to get the following going, because TikTok grows the fastest. Then the Instagram's come along pretty good. Then, of course, my podcast is on YouTube right now. And you might not know this, but I signed a contract not too long ago with Silverlock, which is Dan Bongino's company. and I'm doing segments on Haley's show on Thursday nights. It's a live stream over on Rumble. I don't know how familiar your audience is with Rumble, but Rumble is basically a conservative platform like YouTube. You know what I mean? It's pretty good. So I do segments on Haley's show on Thursday nights. It's called Tactical Detail with Scott Bryson, and we just talk about all things safety and security and things like that. But yeah, and like I tell people all the time, I'm not for everybody, and I know that. I don't care. Like, the word followers drives me crazy. I have bye followers. Dude, who cares? Hitler had millions of followers, and Jesus had 12. I mean, that stuff
that is
just
an
seems
excellent point.
That seems so superficial to me. And of course, Instagram is a highlight reel of your. No one puts their worst pictures on Instagram. I do believe that this is the next chapter of my life for some reason. I don't know why. I definitely feel like I want to spread the gospel more. I mean, I think my platform, like, I'm not trying to compare myself to Tim Tebow or anything like that, but like these athletes that have these big platforms, and people gravitate toward success, or people gravitate toward interesting things, right? And interesting people. So I think that's kind of what I've tried to do with this thing, is like I've tried to do things to help people, which I don't want to sound cliche, but because I do want to help people, but I really want to spread the gospel, and that's kind of where we're headed, I think. And it is probably, there's a chance it's going to, keep me from getting a job or something someday. I'm still need to put food on the table. The social media stuff's not really doing that for me yet. I'm making a little bit here and there, but I still am gainfully employed, and I'm looking for ways to make money, So I realize that my social media presence isn't for everybody, and that might cost me a job, but it is what it is. I'm not going to stop.
I actually want to challenge you on something, if I can. You mentioned that you hate the word followers on Instagram and on TikTok and all these places. I actually love it personally, because I think everybody's following something. There's always leaders in this world, and you can either follow trash, you can follow these terrible things, you can follow these accounts that have no value whatsoever, and you can also follow something that's educational and is going to fill your spirit. Whether you can follow your phone, you can follow, some people follow food, some people, whatever it may be, everybody's following something. So I actually think that followers are very aptly named, and people like you are leaders. I think in order to follow something, there has to be something that's leading your life as well. So every single follower that you get, obviously some mean more than others, but I think people like you especially that are leading and are filling social media with things that are encouraging for the soul and aren't just trash that we can throw out are extremely important. And I think that followers are somewhat important in that aspect as well.
No, I get what you're saying. You can't have a follower if you don't have a leader. I totally get what you're saying. I'm obviously a little older than you are too, so it's a different generation. Like the word subscriber doesn't bother me near as bad as the word follower. I just feel a little. It just makes me feel a little pretentious. You know what I'm saying? I know it's really, it's really not, but it just makes me feel a little weird.
Yeah. Well, I do want to dig into some current events here, and obviously these can be touchy because I'm a little bit more aware of my words when talking about this, because I never want to bash on, for example, Secret Service members or members of security details that are there in a position of service. And at the end of the day, none of us know how we would react unless we're in the situation. Obviously, you know how you would react because you've been in the situation, but I find it incredibly arrogant for a lot of people to criticize people in that position of service when they themselves have never been on that level of service. With that being said, I think the American people in general are entitled to some answers on some of the things that have happened, because frankly, a lot of it doesn't make sense. So I'm hoping you can shed some light on that. So specifically we'll start with the attempted Trump assassination, because I think that was directly tied to secret security and local law enforcement, things that you are an expert in. So just kind of take me through it. What do you think happened there? And do we not check rooftops anymore? Like, I think a lot of people are just exasperated with it and just want to understand why. How did something like that, was that allowed to happen?
Well, this is where I earn my money, I guess, because one of the things I like to say on my show and on Instagram sometimes, I guess, I speak truth to power. And I call balls and strikes on everybody, right, to include the Secret Service. And it's a zero-fail mission. And in my opinion, those guys got a big fat F on July 13th. And I have a problem saying that. They've also done some good things. They have found the tree stand recently, right, at the airport at Palm Beach. They saw a muzzle of a gun sticking out of the grass at a golf course. They've done some good things. but here's where it gets a little dicey, and I know that you're probably okay with this, and your audience may like it and they may not. But I personally believe, we said it a minute ago, and this is what I was sort of alluding to, the standard is the standard, and I feel like that it's easy for me to say because I'm from the cheap seats now. I just feel like I just know how hard it was for me to get that job. 2.5 years. I was squeaky clean. I mean, it was just a really hard job to get. And I gave 25 years of my adult life to it. And I know how hard I worked, and I know how hard the people I worked with worked, and the dedication and the thoroughness. It just feels like the standard's been lowered a little bit, and I can't help but believe DEI is a part of that. And I don't want to start throwing mud on too many people because it's been hard for me to piecemeal this stuff together because people that are still in the job, I'm still connected to the guys. They just don't want to talk about it. And I don't know really why. I don't know if they were made to sign NDAs or whatever, but that young lady that was having a hard time getting her pistol back in her holster, from what I've been told, was the lead advance for that site. And you have to ask yourself, would you really want her in a gunfight with you? Would you want her in a street? I mean, no, she's probably super nice, and she's probably good at computer crimes or something. I don't know, and I feel a little guilty talking like this, but I'm trying to be nice, and I'm also trying to be honest. I just think that sometimes leadership, it gets back to the leadership and the management thing a while ago. So at that time, we had a female director. Nothing wrong with female agents, nothing wrong with having a female director if you're qualified. I work with some females that are still on the job. One of them is actually the special agent in charge of the VP's detail right now, and she's super squared away. She can shoot better than most dudes, and she's fit. Now, she can't probably she wouldn't be able to beat me up because I'm bigger than her, but she would at least put her nose in there and get after it, right? She's very squared away, and she got her job because she's capable, and that's wonderful. But like Julia Pearson she had been a supervisor on Biden's detail when he was the VP. So to me, it's a lot of nepotism. I can't prove that. That's just one man's opinion. And I need to be careful how I say these things because I can't back that up. I can't bring the receipts. It's an observation. She's an overweight, middle-aged woman who, she didn't even have the decency to go to the site day of or next day. I mean, neither did the deputy director, and I know him very well. I used to work with him. He's not there anymore, the deputy at the time. I'm like, what are you guys doing? I just felt like they didn't really do a good job of leading from the front. They didn't do a good job, in my opinion, of compartmentalizing because they, from everything I've been told, were pretty much staunch Democrats, Biden people, and I just don't think they did a great job of checking their politics at the door. Trump wasn't the president, but he was a former president. He was running. So, I think they should have gone out there and done a better job on the back end. Now, to answer your actual question, it comes down to leadership and assets. So I know for a fact that assets, and I don't talk about tradecraft, but there were some assets that weren't in play there that day that should have been, that were requested. And that pisses me off. And had they been there, it wouldn't have happened. Now, at the end of the day, the Secret Service is in charge of the security plan, and they're ultimately responsible. So the buck has to stop with somebody, so the buck stops with the service. However, the police department that was supposed to be on that roof had come off of the roof because it was too hot. Now, if that's the case, then someone needed to freaking put a foot up their butt and get them back up there, or
put a blanket down,
readdress it with Secret Service personnel. But to just drop a post is absolutely, I've never heard of that in my whole life. And for that to have happened, that's why I say I believe that the standard has dropped or lowered, because you go to all these events, all these venues, and nothing happens. And so you let your guard down. And the one time you let your guard down, something happens. So is it ultimately the Secret Service's fault? Absolutely. 100%. Where I got really frustrated is the slope of the pitch of that roof was like 2 degrees. It was nothing. A toddler could walk across it. And for her to say that it was too steep, that's embarrassing. Just take it. Stop. People aren't stupid. The American people aren't stupid. The shooter may say, hey, we screwed up. We screwed up because you did screw up. And the man almost died because of it. I think had some of those assets been in place, I firmly believe that they would have saved the day in one way or the other. I think that another thing the Secret Service gets wrong, I don't know if it's changed. I hope it has. I haven't, talk to anybody about this that would know, because it's just not something that you go around talking about. But I think that the threat model should be your protection model based. But what I'm trying to say is the protection model, the assets that you get, whether it's snipers, which he had, counter assault team, which he had, a small unit, whether it was surveillance guys, which he didn't have, post standards, cop, blah, 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 security room. They run the security room out of the truck. You didn't even have a freaking security room. That's a freaking F minus. What are you doing? And it shouldn't be based on manpower. And I've seen time and time again the service do things based on manpower, and that's bullcrap. And it almost cost us. It should be based, your protection model should be based on threat level, not title. And what I mean by that is this. Harris was in Pennsylvania that same day, Pittsburgh or somewhere, and because she's the sitting VP, I'm not saying she doesn't get things. You don't take away from her, but she gets what she gets based on her title. Okay, that's cool. There's just really not that many threats against VPs. I'm not saying they shouldn't have protection. They should, but okay, they're the next man up in case something happens to POTUS, right? So she has this platform. Well, then you got Trump over here who's got a high threat level, but because he's not a sitting continuity of government, right, he had things denied. And I think they got that just backwards. I think it should be based on your current threat level, not your title. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And I think that leads perfectly into my next question, because as you mentioned, Trump, and especially as polarizing of a figure as Trump is, he is like the highest threat level. Like Biden, not to say that somebody couldn't have made an attempt on his life, but I think Trump is so polarizing that everybody knew that the threat level was way higher for him. So it really was exhausting to see like the negligence around. If it was negligence around Harris, it would be like, okay, what are we doing? But even more so around Trump, it was amazing to me. But you also mentioned there for a second that the leadership were, from what you understand, leaning Democrat. And I hate to ask the question, but I think a lot of people are wondering it. You know, is it just negligence, or is there something more nefarious going on? Because the level of negligence was so obvious and so really unbelievable that it really does beg that question. Is it just negligence, or is there something more?
Yeah, I think there's kind of a two-pronged answer there, maybe. I do think there was, again, it's one man's opinion. I can't say, I have this email showing this, right? I can't bring the receipts. You know, per se. I've been around the game a long time. And for the first time in my life, I experienced what I felt like was negligence, just a lack of lack. I've told you, I'm a conservative Christian dude. Okay, whatever. When I was on George W. Bush's detail, one of my best friends in the world he wasn't crazy like they are now, but he was a liberal. He's a liberal. Liberals aren't the problem, by the way, for your audience. It's the left. The left are crazy. Liberals aren't the problem. We used to think that they were, but they're actually not the problem. It's the doggone far left. But anyway, I digress. And my buddy Alex was a very, very liberal dude. And he always voted for Gore or Clinton or whatever. So we agreed to disagree, whatever. But guess what we talked about? We talked about our families. We talked about sports. We didn't let politics dominate our lives. We just didn't care that much because we were able to compartmentalize and do our job. There's not a day on the job that he went to work and didn't do his job for Bush, just like there wasn't a day on the job when I went to the White House and I didn't do my job for Obama. That's not going to happen. That's not a thing. And for the first time in my life, I felt like, holy crap, what is happening right now? You know what I mean? I just think that politics has become so polarized, and that, you know, not to say that if you're a Democrat, you can't believe in God or that you're not Christians. I know there's Democrats in my family. But by and large, you know, the people that are these nut jobs, not to say that the people in the Secret Service were nut jobs, but like these far left lunatics, they don't have a faith in God. They don't. Their politics is their religion, and so it's like it's polarizing because they hate as much as we love. Just like ISIS and Al Qaeda love death is more than we love life. These guys hate as much as we love. Now, not to say that the leadership, the Secret Service is that way, because I have no reason to believe that that's true. I was appalled at the lack of, I don't know, urgency, if you will, because Trump, I'm a Trump man. I was on his detail for 3 years as a supervisor. I love the man. Now, do I agree with everything he does? No, he's a human being. I'm not a Trump apologist. I'm a Jesus Christ apologist, but I can like someone and not agree with everything they do, but they can't. It's a zero sum game with these folks. Like, some things are gray. There's black and there's white. Well, sometimes it's gray, but not for them. They just circle the wagons all the time, and it's party before country, and it's ridiculous. But you know, Trump, very polarizing. You know, there were plenty of people to include me, that I didn't like Obama's politics for crap. But no one on our side, people didn't like him, but people didn't vehemently hate the man. Yeah, he got some threats. Every president gets threats, but not like Trump did. Just the sheer lack of, I don't know, it was just almost like a cavalier attitude. I don't know if that's the right way to describe it. It was just very frustrating. And I don't think that, let me say it like this. I believe that the deep state is a real thing. And when I say the deep state, I don't just mean in America. I mean the world. If you pay any attention to anything, you know that the one world order is a real thing that they're trying to push, and climate change is a part of it, and vaccines is another part of it, and human population control, all these weird things. These people have God complexes because they probably don't believe in God. Like, you can't make me believe that Bill Gates is a Christian. If he is, well, he's different than I am. But like the Klaus Schwab and these guys, they want to control the population. They want to have the haves and the have-nots. There's no middle class, right? And so I think when I say the deep state, I mean the deep world. Having said that, I am not convinced that crooks acted alone. The 20-year-old kid, how did that kid get in an inner perimeter with a rifle? And then, so I don't think the Secret Service was complicit. I just don't. You know, I was Eric Trump's detail leader for 15 months, and I talked to him the day after that, and he was so upset, and he should have been. It was his dad, right? And he's like, I think the secret, you know, maybe I'm like, look, man, there's just, without getting into the detail, I didn't even get into detail with him. There's too many layers. There's too many facets. There's just, in my mind, there's just no way. I guess there's always a way. But knowing what I know about the job, there's just really no way to have like a Manchurian candidate type thing where the Secret Service was complete. I just don't believe that. I will go, unless you can show me an email or show me a video of a person confessing or whatever, I just never believe it. I believe that it was played a role. I believe having a little bit of a cavalier attitude played a role. And then I do believe that the deep state, who helped him, I don't know. Did anybody help him? Maybe not. I don't know. But it's hard for me to believe that this young 20-year-old guy got up on a roof 130 yards away with no help from somebody. And then you go to his house, and he has no social media footprint. They said his house was as clean as an operating room. You could have eaten off the floor. What 20-year-old kid lives in a pristine house? Nobody that I know.
Was in a BlackRock commercial. Yeah.
Saw that.
Random stuff.
It doesn't pass the smell test. I don't have any proof of anything. It's just one man's opinion, but I feel like it's a pretty good opinion based on what I did. But I really don't think, and I know your audience some of your audience members may think I'm just being a homer and whatever. But if I thought that, I would tell you, I would. Mm-hmm. But I just think it was neglect coupled with, the Murphy's Law, right? What can go wrong will. And so it's like I could get shot in the toe and die. Bad guy can get double tapped in the chest and live. It's just the way it goes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, on one hand, that's good to hear. On the other hand, it's quite discouraging because it leaves more questions than there is answers. I do want to move into the Charlie Kirk assassination as well. I know that obviously that's not Secret Service, that's private security, but I'm assuming trained in a similar way. So can you speak to the response of Charlie Kirk's team? Because there's been a lot of questions around their response, some of the signals that were being given or not given. Maybe you can speak to some of those commonplace, if they were signals or not, and then also their response in getting them out of there. I'm assuming you've watched, as most people have, countless times that video over and over and over again. So just what did you see in those videos, and speak to the security team's response?
Yeah, that whole thing just made me sick. That was like Trump 2.0, right? Obviously Trump lived, but I had that same sick feeling in my stomach, but way worse because the guy actually died on a live stream, which is brutal. Well, I'm not sure where to start. I think it stinks to high heaven. Again, you got a lone shooter on a roof. How do you get the gun up there? He took the gun apart, then he put it in the wood. I don't believe that, and I want to be really careful how I talk about this because, again, Dan Bongino is a good friend of mine. Dan is the deputy director of the FBI, and I trust Dan. If Dan is saying something is the way it is, I have no reason to disbelieve him. I know that could be unpopular in certain circles, and that's okay. Cash, I don't know Cash Patel from Adam. I still have for Cash. I was a little worried about paying Bondi there for a little while with the Epstein thing, but I think that Dan Bongino is a real patriot, and I believe he is telling the truth. So I'm going to have to defer to the experts on that because I'm not an investigator anymore. I wasn't there. Yeah. As far as the hand signals and things go, I mean, at this point, it's just conjecture and opinion. Secret Service, we don't really use hand signals like that. I mean, you do some things on the counter assault team, but it's like CQB type stuff. I think people do want an answer, and I think people do deserve an answer. Like the Epstein thing, this is what I wanted to say a while ago about like the Trump thing. I'm a big Trump man, but like when Trump kept saying, well, this is just a hoax. This is a Democrat hoax and a scam, I'm like, no, it's not. Like, I didn't understand what he was saying, and I kept wanting to find out, like, who's this guy's PR person that's telling him to say this stuff? Like, this is a real thing that happened with real victims. So that's why I got really discouraged with Pam Bondi's. Like, where's the stinking list? You know? Mm-hmm. And like Jeffrey Epstein, I don't believe that dude killed himself either. But it's like you can only go down so many rabbit holes. At some point, you have to believe something. And I don't know if this analogy will make sense or not. And I'm not saying this didn't happen. I'm saying we have this conversation at my house a lot, and it gets a little heated. You know, since COVID, since 2020, my eyes have been open to a bunch of things, okay? I have lost just about all faith in the medical profession. Not all. One of my daughter-in-laws is a nurse. There are good people in the industry, but I'm just saying, as far as big pharma goes and all this stuff, I think it's all about making money and population control. That's just what I believe. Having said that, since my eyes were opened because of COVID, I think we got duped. I am not sure we even landed on the moon. I'm not saying we didn't. I'm saying now, like I never thought, of course we landed on the moon. I've seen the videos. We're talking like, why would I disbelieve that? Like I was just like, I'm like, holy crap, I was a sheep and didn't know it. And so, again, not saying we didn't. I'm saying I'm not convinced we did. But I'm starting to lean toward the fact we did not. The point I'm making is at some point, you can't go down every single rabbit hole because something's got to stick. The bottom line is Charlie's dead, and that sucks. Do I think it was organized? I feel like it was probably a little bit similar to the Trump thing. We have a shooter, but how did he act alone? I'm not convinced that he did. But I don't think whomever may or may not have helped him, I think it was definitely orchestrated without the security details involvement. Just like I don't think the Secret Service was involved at all with Trump's thing. I don't think his detail was involved at all with his demise. Now, I know Candace Owens has been very vocal and some other people have. I think we do. I think it's only fair to get some answers. Just like I don't know why. Like, I don't even think Trump has been briefed. I don't know that he hasn't, but I don't think he's come out and said, well, I don't know that he's been completely briefed on what happened in Butler. I don't think he's been completely briefed on some things. I don't think any president's completely briefed, with things. I think, the machine, the deep state keeps going, and these presidents come and go every 4 or every 8 years. And so, like, I don't think they're read in. I don't think the Air Force reads them in on Area 51. I don't think that they get read in on a lot of crap. They don't know what they don't know, right? And they're there for a short time, but the deep state stays around. So I know that's probably not the answer your audience was hoping I would say. I'm not sure, how else to really talk about that. I mean, I have opinions just like you do, but until I have hard evidence, I don't believe it was I'll say this. I don't think it was a 30-06. I think that would have decapitated him. Soft tissue right here.
Yeah.
I think it was probably a 5.56 round or 2.23 round, same thing basically. It could have been a 22. I don't know what it was. But the fact that the bullet stuck it is, why didn't they do an autopsy? Where's the bullet? All this stuff. And they keep talking about, what's the guy's name? Tyler's DNA is all over the gun. Yeah, the DNA is going to be on the gun. It was his grandfather's. It was in his house for 20 years. So what? Where's the ballistics match? Where's the test on the ballistics? There's just so many unanswered questions. It's very, and they went out and paved. They went out and paved over the crime scene like the next day or 2 days, whatever it was.
Yeah, it makes no sense.
The whole thing stinks to high heaven. And I know it's not a really good answer, but I haven't spent hours investigating it like Candace has.
Yeah.
But I believe it stinks to high heaven.
Yeah, obviously that's not like a very clarifying answer for the common folk. But at the same time, I also wanted to say that it clarifies things for me in that the way that I tend to go about these things is I talk to people that I know in the field. So, for example, with COVID, my uncle actually, he is the owner and co-founder. Him and his wife founded a company called AngieX, which they are in the process of curing cancer. And they believe that they have a cure. They're in human trials right now, which will cure all forms of solid cancers. His main investor is Peter Thiel. So that there's that's a whole nother episode on, the world cabal stuff that you were talking about. But his opinion, I had him on the podcast about a month ago as well. And his opinion on COVID was that, similar to what you said, a lot of people's eyes were opened. And he was just amazed. I don't know his political leanings either way, but he was amazed that he watched colleagues that he knew better. Like, these people in these companies knew better that this vaccine that was coming out was going to be way more harmful than it was good, and it didn't work, and it couldn't work. So I think a lot of people shared the same story, myself included, of COVID was the wake-up call, and it makes you question everything. And is the original story, or the story that's presented by government and popular media, ever the truth? Because frankly, as you mentioned, the moon, it doesn't seem plausible, and it seems really convenient that we're in the middle of a Cold War and both sides are lying about a lot of things, and we just win the space race and send a man to the moon when, computers were the size of a room. So I think the moral of the story is that I feel like with the Trump administration especially, there needs to be a better answer than, for example, on the Epstein files, it didn't happen. Like, we can't just pretend that these things aren't happening, or we can't just pretend that this dude got a gun apart on top of a roof under high stress situation with a screwdriver in less than 5 minutes, when it would take most people that are highly experienced with guns way longer than that, and then reassemble it in the woods. None of it makes sense. And so I wish we had a better answer.
Yeah, why would you put it back together? It makes no sense. I mean, that why would you take it apart? I understand why you would take it apart. You take it apart to put it in your backpack to run away, maybe, but like, to reassemble it and put it in a box or a towel, or what? I mean, I've seen. I don't know what to believe. Like, was it in a towel? Was it in a box? I've seen, but like, what? We are being lied to. I believe that we are being lied to on all fronts about almost everything, and that's why I kind of do these things. I get my truth from the Bible. I try to get my news sources from. I get it from different places. I want the news, and I want to let me figure out what I take from that. I don't want propaganda. I think both sides do a lot of propagating. I think that it's the uniparty. I think Trump's the outlier. There's a handful of Republicans up there, I think, that are still probably good people, but I think it's pretty much a uniparty. And I'm sorry I didn't probably give you like the smoking gun answer you wanted to have, but I don't have it, and I haven't spent a ton of time going down that rabbit hole like I know Candace has. But I will say this, and I said it already. Something's not right. I don't know exactly what that is. Yeah. Something's not right, and I also know that it's a need to know thing. Like, you don't need to know everything. Yeah. Okay, I don't need to know everything about Area 51. I would love to know about Area 51. I would love to know about Mount Weather. I don't necessarily need to know about those things, but the Epstein thing, yes, I need to know about that. The Charlie Kirk thing, I need to know about that. The Trump thing, I need to know about that. Like, that's not asking too much, to your point,
Yeah, certainly. I want to hedge with, even though you didn't give us a smoking gun answer, I didn't expect you to. And I think in its own way, it's also very comforting to know that people that are very involved with, like you said, Dan Bongino, you know him well, and he's a friend, somebody that has connections like yourself so high up that is still also in the dark, just like the rest of us. But it's also comforting to know that, like, okay, we're not crazy here either. Like, other people are thinking and feeling the same things, that are intimately aware of the inner workings of these things. So thank you for also giving me, and I'm sure many other people, comfort on that. But moving on here, last couple questions. I really want to get your advice on, if there is a young man, let's say my age, going into college or coming out of college, that is looking at the world and deciding, maybe it's his political beliefs, maybe it's what we talked about earlier with his faith, with being dangerous in a garden, hopefully, but it may not always be a garden, it may be a war. What are the number 1, 2, and 3 pieces of advice that you would give a young man that you could instill in him today?
About it a little bit a while ago. You have to be bold. You have to know what you're talking about, right? So I felt like I gave some pretty solid biblical answers, because I believe that hook, line, and sinker. You saw how I sort of shifted and gave more of a neutral, not such a great answer in terms of Charlie Kirk and things like, because I don't have the answer. I have opinions, but I don't want to pontificate on things that could be, right? I want to stick to the facts. So I think that you have to know the difference between arguing or debating or having knowledge based on facts versus emotions. It's okay to feel a way. Just because you feel a certain way, and you're entitled to feel any way you want to feel, do not misunderstand what I'm saying. You're entitled to feel any way you want to feel. That doesn't necessarily mean you're right, okay? So, example, if I open the door for a woman and that offends her, or if I say, yes, ma'am, and she's 30 years old and I'm 53 years old, that's the way I was brought up. I'm just being polite. Chivalry is not dead. Just because you're offended doesn't mean I'm wrong. So that's point number one. Now, you're going to offend some people, and not everybody's going to like you. They're not. And that's a good thing, because if you're standing on truth, if you're standing on your principles, whatever they are, hopefully for you it's faith in Jesus. If you're standing on the truth, the real truth, not your version of the truth, but the truth, it doesn't matter. The Bible says, if God is for me, who can be against me? Who cares? I want people to like me. I really do. I really do want people to like me. But if you don't, I don't lose sleep over that. So you've got to be comfortable in your own skin. Okay, so you're going to have to learn to be bold. You've got to learn that sometimes, you can be wrong. I mean, you can be right and still be wrong. You know what I mean? I'm trying to think of an example I want to give on that. It's okay. So let me see about this. You can edit some of that out. That was kind of weird. So it's not a matter of if you get knocked down, right? It's a matter of when you get knocked down. So when you get knocked down, how are you going to respond? Are you going to lay there and feel sorry for yourself, or are you going to get back up and keep fighting? Mike Tyson says it best. Everybody's got to play until they get punched in the mouth, right? So it's like, it's coming. Your day is coming. You're going to fail at something. But what you have to do is get up. And the thing I would like to kind of wrap it up with that is, if you fail, if I fail, or I watch you fail, or whatever the case is, if we just fail and I don't learn from it and I don't take something from that, then it's just a failure. I want to learn from my mistakes so that it doesn't happen again. And I also want to learn from your mistakes in hopes that I don't make a mistake. So failure can be sometimes, and it sounds crazy because it's not good when you're going through it at the time, but on the back end, sometimes failure is the best teacher of all.
Yeah. I love that answer. I think the last thing I want to ask is, one day you and me are both going to die. It could be tomorrow, could be next month. We discussed earlier, you're well acquainted with that notion, and you seem like you know exactly where you're going. I know where I'm going. So I'm not worried about when that might be, but you're entering this next chapter where your reach is ever expanding, and more ears are listening to you, more and more ears and eyes are gazing towards you, and you will be a reflection of them towards God. What do you hope that your legacy will be in the previous chapters that you've had around presidents, around powerful people, and then as well as the average man, the average young man that's following you, whether it be on Instagram or listening to your podcast? What do you hope you leave with them, the moral and the lesson of your life will be?
I hope, my sincere hope, is that people will remember me as a man of faith. My job titles, the money, the whatever, doesn't matter. The only thing you can take to heaven with you is your children, right? So I want my legacy to be, Scott Bryson was a flawed man. He got some things wrong, but by gosh, he sure did love the Lord. He loved his family unconditionally with agape love, right? He loved his country. So my little mantra that I try to live my life by is faith, family, and country, okay? And when I coach ball, I would substitute that last part for football, faith, family, and football. So anything that you elevate over the Lord, whether it's your cell phone, whether it's football or basketball or gambling or whatever, alcohol, sex, whatever, anything can become a god if you allow it to, right? I love sports, and I love doing things and going on vacations and having deer hunting and all the things. But if deer hunting became more important to me than serving the Lord, then I'm missing the mark. So I really hope that my actions speak louder than words, and I hope, my sincere hope is that, my job never defined me. It just really never did. I got some things wrong along the way, but I never walked around with my chest puffed out. When I'm a Secret Service agent, I'm on a cat team. No one cares, bro. Like, no one really cares. Stop. Like, some people might think it's cool, but like at the end of the day, it pays my bills. Really, as much as I love that job, I missed being with my family. I hated being gone. I hated missing things. Yeah. So I really hope that my legacy is that people will say, maybe, and when I say this, God brings everybody to him. He just uses us as vessels. Like sometimes we might plant the seed. Sometimes we have to water that seed. Sometimes we get to see the harvest. We reap the benefit of seeing someone come to salvation. I just want to bring as many people to heaven with me as possible. Charlie Kirk said it great. He's like, let's make heaven crowded. I mean, I don't want people going to hell. I just don't. And there's some really, really bad people on this earth that we all deserve hell, by the way. So, whether it's a rapist or an Al-Qaeda guy who's killed a bunch of, Marines or something, as long as that person can come to faith in Christ, then I'm all for it, dude. I really just don't want people going to hell. I don't think they realize how bad. I don't realize how bad it would be, but it scares me to death, dude. I want nothing to do with it.
Scott, that's not just a great answer. That's the only answer. So I just want to thank you so much for coming on. You have dropped immense amounts of wisdom, not just outside of, what you do and what you did occupationally, but also as a man. And I hope a lot of people listen to this episode and take something from it. It's definitely one of my favorites. And just thank you so much for coming on and being a part of it.
Well, I really appreciate you having me. I'd like to say one last thing, if you don't mind. So if there's any listener out there that maybe not be a believer, or maybe you're interested in Christian, like Joe Rogan's close. He's not there yet, but like Sean Ryan came around, and I think Joe's coming around maybe. I would say get a Bible and start in the book of John. The whole New Testament's amazing. The Gospels are Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. But I would start in the book of John and then go from there. And then if you want to really get into the weeds a little bit, go to Romans. There's this thing called the Romans Road to Salvation. You could Google that, and it'll tell you exactly which verses to read, because God tells us that no one is righteous, not even one, right? Not even one. So, I would say that Billy Graham was probably less of a bad guy than I am, but like God said, no one is good. So I would just encourage your audience that if there's someone out there that's maybe searching, you try to fill that hole with alcohol or porn or drugs or sex. It's never going to be there, dude. Only Jesus can fill that gap. And I would start in the book of John, and I would get plugged into a church and see where God takes you.
Perfect. All right. Scott, thanks for coming on. Everybody else, we'll see you in the next episode.
See ya.